A lot of important things the Senate's taking up right now. Obviously, the issues of immigration, budget, disaster relief. There's a lot of pertinent issues that need to be resolved. One of those things that was in the middle of the conversation came up today. And it's a part of conversation that, quite frankly, doesn't come up often in this body, but this seemed like a reasonable piece to be able to come up. Came up to the Senate to open debate on it and failed to be able to get 60 votes to even support beginning to talk about what should be an easy conversation on a hard issue. This issue about children in life. In 1973, when Roe v. Wade passed, the Supreme Court at that time determined children that were viable, and that's the definition they left out there, children that were viable, there is a governmental interest in being able to engage with those children. Well, viability in 1973 is very different than what it is now, decades later. 1973, viable was a much older child. Now we know a lot more children survive. Children that are born at 22 weeks of gestation have between a 50 to 60% chance of survival now. That was not so in 1973. The rest of the world has caught up to this technology, and their government has acknowledged this issue of a child that has 10 fingers and 10 toes and a beating heart. They suck their thumb in the womb, they yawn, they stretch, they move. That is a child. Now, I understand there's wide argument about a child at 8 weeks that I believe is a child, but others look at it and say it doesn't look like a child yet. But a child at 20, 22, 24 weeks of gestation, that child even looks like a child when you look at that child in the ultrasound. It's hard to disagree, especially when children are born at that age prematurely and they survive. And many of us know kids that were born at 22 weeks. The bill that came up today on the Senate floor that had bipartisan support and had a majority support, but not 60 senators' support to be able to discuss this, was a very simple, straightforward bill. It asked this one question: will we as Americans continue to allow elective abortions when the child is viable? The Supreme Court said in 1973 the government has a right to be able to step in and protect a viable child. There's no question they are at that age of viability. There's no question at that age of 20 weeks, science shows us they experience pain in the womb. And that if surgery happens for a child in utero like that, that child is actually given anesthetic to be able to calm their pain during that surgery, because they have a developed nervous system, because they have a beating heart. But this body refused to even take the issue up and debate it. Now, there's no question I'm very passionate about the issue of life and about children, and that we should, as a culture, protect children. But this one confuses me for this body more than any other issue. There are only 7 nations in the world that allow elective abortions after 20 weeks. There are only 4 nations in the world that allow elective abortions after 24 weeks. We are in that elite club. We are in the elite club with 3 other nations that allow elective abortions that late: Vietnam, North Korea, and China. The worst human rights violators in the world. And there sits the United States in that very elite club. Why are we there? Because we can't even discuss the possibility that a child is a child, and anyone who's ever seen an ultrasound at 24 weeks cannot deny that is a child. And if that child was delivered prematurely, they would survive and grow and develop into a person. The only difference between that child at 20 weeks and an adult now is time. This issue will continue to come up, and it should, because we as a culture should promote a culture of life and of honoring people at their most vulnerable moment, and there's not a more vulnerable moment than that for that child. We've got to get out of this club of elective abortions in a group that only allows it of North Korea, China, and Vietnam. When will we wake up to the facts the entire rest of the world sees? All of Europe, all of Africa, all of Central America, all of South America, every one of those countries. When will we wake up to what the rest of the world sees plain? child is a child. And we need to be able to guard those lives. So, Mr. President, I am sad that today, in a bipartisan vote with more than 50 votes to be able to get into it and pass it, we didn't have enough people that even wanted to discuss it to be able to get on the bill. We'll bring it up again. For the sake of those children and their future, we'll bring it up again. And we'll keep bringing the facts to the argument, not the emotion, but the facts to the argument. And we'll win people over. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.